then watching it fall apart, the last 2 weeks of August was, I don't know if traumatic is too strong, but I remember feeling just this sense of disbelief. It's disbelief knowing it could happen, but watching it happen and feeling quite a bit of dismay. So it didn't make transition easier, if you will. So as we're moving in there, one, it's a 20-year anniversary of 9/11 coming up. There's a lot of things going on, and to watch Afghanistan end that way, certainly personally traumatic for me and emotional. Not a happy person at that point, and in some cases, because of my unhappiness, not sure very thoughtful in terms of what we were seeing there. And I actually know that's a feeling that was very widespread among veterans. I felt it for Afghans, I felt it for our veteran population, and it got very noisy and still is noisy about the actual withdrawal, the evacuation from Afghanistan.
How do I know what I think until I see what I say?
The Green Notebook, carried by military leaders around the world. Within those pages are sweat, tears, triumphs, and the hard-won lessons of life. Lessons worth sharing. Each week, the team dives into the notebooks of military leaders, business professionals, authors, athletes and coaches, and entertainers to share lessons and help you lead with the best version of yourself.
Today's sponsor for the episode is Ultra Defense Corporation. For more than 2 decades, Ultra Defense Corporation has supported every major conflict where America's interests were on the line. They proudly serve our republic by delivering the world's finest munitions and next-generation energetics to the United States and her allies. At UDC, they answer to the warfighter, not shareholders. Their mission is simple: deliver what victory demands, anytime, anywhere, any objective. Welcome to another episode of From the Green Notebook. I'm your host, Joe Byerly, and this week we're diving into the Green Notebook of retired Army General Scott Miller. This is a special episode. We filmed it in the McKinney Lounge at B-Hawk in Southern Pines, North Carolina. So a special thank you to Brad and Jess Holling for not only hosting us, but helping make this conversation possible. I'd also like to thank my friend Paul Scholl, who worked behind the scenes night and day to bring all aspects of this episode together and to make it a reality. In this conversation, General Miller speaks candidly about Afghanistan. He talks about what happened during the withdrawal. He talks about how he dealt with the aftermath and what he hopes those who sacrificed so much there will take from it. We also talk about the importance of examining Afghanistan honestly, not to relitigate the past, but to make sure that we're capturing the right lessons and bringing those lessons forward with us. It's a powerful conversation, and I think it's going to resonate with anybody who served in Afghanistan or who have wrestled with trying to make sense of what their service meant. So, grab your green notebooks and please welcome to the show, General Scott Miller.
We're here, and every time we've done this in the past, it's been over a Zoom session, thousands of miles away, and now we're here in the same room together in B-Hawk in Southern Pines. So thanks for joining me today.
No, Joe, my pleasure. Good seeing you, and it's always good to be in a place, establishment owned by Jess and Brad, huh?
It is, and it's funny, like looking back. Well, it's not funny, but as I was getting close to ending command, battalion level command in 2024, I remember you would text me or call me about once a week and ask me if I was ready for the transition. And because I'm younger than you, I got it. I don't know what you're talking about. I did 20 years, you did 38. I'm not going to have any issues with it. And for me, as I retired and moved into this new lifestyle, I remember there was a moment. We had moved every couple years for the last 20, and we installed this 12 by 8 prefab shed in the backyard. And, as we loaded the last bit of stuff from the garage in there, I had this moment of like, this is it. Like, for the first time in my adult life, I'm sticking a stake in the ground, and I'm going to be going to the same pizza place every Friday. I'm going to get old sitting in the dentist chair at the local dentist. And I was really struggling with it. And I think it was in that moment that I think I knew what you were talking about. Like, my life was totally different. Whereas before, the things that we were doing had this huge national security consequences. And now the consequences are just as important. Making sure the kids get to school, making sure the laundry gets pushed through, making sure dinner's on the table. Things I now share with my wife that I didn't have to worry about before. But it was just different. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at, that things were going to be different.
Yeah. I think transition hits everybody a little bit differently. I mean, every individual has their own journey in transition. And I really started to think that maybe I was unique because it had been my entire adult life. But when I look at you, it's also your entire adult life up to where you are. I just happened to be older when I stepped out of the military. There's a sense of confidence in all of us. We have these ideas of what we want to do, and then you actually get out and you start finding out, well, maybe it doesn't quite work like that. But I've talked to people. They're the most cool under pressure. You've seen them in combat. They're so even keeled. You're not sure that their heart rate goes above 45, and they self-admit that they've had anxiety attacks as they're transitioning. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, it's leaving something that you have spent your entire adult life with, and it is going to be different, and you're not entirely sure how it's going to be different. You're leaving what is, it's already been well documented in different literature. You're leaving your tribe, and no matter how much tribe says you're always welcome back, you actually are leaving. And certainly you can come back and visit, but people that you grew up with, in some cases you were in charge of, now you watch them taking positions, and there's this sudden realization they don't need that much of your guidance anymore. They can do this on their own. So there's a couple things in transition that are pretty tough. You and I have talked about it. It's part of it is what are your habits? What are your habits as you go out? What I always tell people in the military: try to focus on what you know were your good habits while you were on the job, and see how many of those good habits you can take over post-military. And I've talked about reading. I've talked about fitness, and it's fitness for different reasons. It's fitness for the rest of your life. It's not fitness to go out and be ready to go fight Al Qaeda or something else, but fitness for the rest of your life. But it's a journey.
It is. And one of the questions about that journey I really want to know is, like, you retire in, was it November of 21, right? But when did you leave Afghanistan?
Actually, we're sitting today as we're taping, 5 years plus 2 days to the date. We departed with my a smaller group, kind of some of the key individuals around me. You know some of them. Michelle Schmidt, Donnie was with me, Dee Dee, Jeremiah Inman, and others. And we departed, I want to say on the 12th, and we're back in continental United States 5 years ago today.
And then in August, the withdrawal happens, and now you're essentially on the sidelines watching this play out. So I was curious, like, as you look back at your transition, what was that challenge like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. We had obviously completed the military withdrawal as directed in July. But then now you have a component, you have an embassy still in play in Afghanistan. And quite frankly, I had big concerns as we left people behind, to include Pete Vaisley was back there kind of heading up a embassy security force. But then watching it fall apart, the last 2 weeks of August was, I don't know if traumatic is too strong, but I remember feeling just this sense of disbelief. It's disbelief knowing it could happen, but watching it happen and feeling quite a bit of dismay. So it didn't make transition easier, if you will. So as we're moving in there, one, it's a 20-year anniversary of 9/11 coming up. There's a lot of things going on, and to watch Afghanistan end that way, certainly personally traumatic for me and emotional. Not a happy person at that point, and in some cases, because of my unhappiness, not sure very thoughtful in terms of what we were seeing there. And I actually know that's a feeling that was very widespread among veterans. I felt it for Afghans, I felt it for our veteran population, and it got very noisy and still is noisy about the actual withdrawal, the evacuation from Afghanistan.
You and I, we've talked. I mean, we've been talking about this for years now because this is coming up on the 5th anniversary of it, and I do remember conversations we had around that time, and my experiences with you, you've always been kind of even keeled, cool, calm, collected in all sorts of situations, but it was the first time I heard you like very angry. And it was for over a prolonged period of time, but eventually you moved past that. And so I'm curious, like, how did that transition for you come about?
Yeah, I was angry, and what I've personally learned when I get emotionally charged about an issue, I am less thoughtful. I know that, and I know that, and you may have seen me as calm, cool, and collected, but there's times where something would bother me, and I knew I had to take a deep breath and step back, or I was going to have a reaction which was out of proportion to whatever problem we were dealing with.
You were pissed. I just want to say you were pissed at me a couple times, and I saw glimpses of it, but I'm talking like the big situation.
No, this hurt us, and it hurt us. It's and I say us, I'm talking about the veteran community, and I include our diplomats, I include our NATO multinational partners in there as well, because all of a sudden there became this sense of, was this worth it? Here's how it ended, and was this worth it? And I think we ought to talk about that a little bit in this conversation, because I do believe it was worth it at the individual level. And I think the worth that our veterans should feel and the pride they should feel is real. And again, we can talk about some of that. But on a very personal level, if I made a really strong self-assessment, I was angry. I was angry at some people above me, maybe some people to my left and right, like how could they let this happen? And then I remembered the great words of General Dunford: whenever there's a problem, start drawing the circle around your desk first, and what were your shortfalls, and then you can work out from there. But I carried that into my transition. And I know it wasn't healthy. I know it wasn't healthy, and it's and people say, well, you have every right to be mad or angry or disappointed. And maybe, but at the same time, are you solving any problems with that anger or that disappointment, that being emotionally charged like that? And I've actually seen some guys that I have a great deal of respect for, that I've worked with, and they've left service angry, and they became angry, and they stayed angry. And I just tell you, in some cases, it's not the same person that I worked with, that I admired and respected. And they went off, decided to take the rest of their life and just be angry. And when you be angry, when you're angry, the conversations are very difficult to have. And I made up my mind probably about the spring of 22, might have been later in 22, that was not going to be me. And I knew that it wasn't healthy, and I knew that you need to find the good in life, and some things you pack up and you put them in their proper place, and it deals with how you treat people in the future as well.
Yeah, I've had this conversation as well with a bunch of guys that men and women that both went through Afghanistan everything from single tours to multiple tours. And, one of the things that I feel like keeps coming back to is like everybody has like an individual story within that deployment. And some sort of growth happened, just some sort of experience that completely changed them. And, like for me, my time, like the friendships that came out of that deployment, like I've been through a bunch of different assignments over the course of my career, but this was the one period of time where even to this day, I'm still texting, still checking in on, still getting, birthday messages, like things like that from this like core group of people. And if any of them needed me, I'd be there. And then even, the time away, the growth I had in that and being able to prepare myself for eventual command, like all that came out of that. Yes, there was a sacrifice. Yes, I was away. And there was other deployments too, where it was a much greater sacrifice down at the tactical level. But I look back on all those, and they were all growth experiences. They all made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And like you, I feel like you could anger is a choice. You can either be angry about it and regretful and just completely damper all the positive experiences you have, or make that choice.
Yeah. I actually had this moment of panic. You mentioned I retired in November of 21, and I don't write speeches, so I really didn't have a speech to really recall everything I said. And I think I woke up about 4 days later and go, "What did I tell everybody?" And I hadn't been drinking. It was just kind of a blur of the retirement. But one of the things I do remember explicitly, what I said there was I was getting a lot of what I'd call sympathy, like, oh, because I just finished a 35-month tour, which is a pretty long tour, and does take a toll on you. But I told people, I said, I've heard people say, "Hey, I'm sorry you had to do all this time and the rest of it. That must have been hard." But I said, please don't feel sorry for me. My 3 years, 35 months, whatever it came out to, in Afghanistan, even with this really crappy ending, was something that I enjoyed. Don't get me wrong. I miss being in the United States, and there was a lot going on in the United States, COVID and different big events that were going on in the United States at the time, and I miss that. And I know that there's part of my life in the United States that I'm not going to be able to it can't repeat. It's already passed, but the experience there was pretty powerful for me, and it was powerful because of the people I met, and it was. In my mind, and I can see that, when I go up and I visit these guys, and I'll keep them nameless just for operational security, but you're down in Helmand and you're talking to a first group dive team that just thwarted a Taliban suicide attack, and they're pretty damn proud of what they did. And I'm looking at them and I'm pretty proud of what they did too. Or you go up to Kunduz, and I still go visit the guys from the Red Empire. You go to Kunduz and you watch an AOB, or you watch them as they have now stopped a provincial attack by their sheer presence, some of their skill sets, and you watch what they're doing with their Afghan partners. And those are moments you'll never forget. Or you go down to Jalalabad, where ISIS hits a big attack, suicide attack against Fenty, and you see where the guys have plugged that thing up and stopped ISIS in their tracks. But then it's the everyday pieces too. So the people I've met internationally, and Afghans too, by the way. There's still some Afghans that a lot of them that I'm very close with, and we talk a lot about this. But to not be there means you don't have those experiences. And what I've found in very difficult times, things go one of two ways. You either completely break apart, or you come out of it stronger. And you and I have talked about this. That would be my ideal outcome for veterans. Again, I know Afghanistan didn't turn out well for every individual, but I don't remember going down and talking to people and just seeing them, this is hopeless or anything else. I saw them doing their job and doing their duty. And the relationships that came out of that are pretty powerful, and they should be. And they should be relationships that are carried into the future.
What about, the men and women who lost friends, over there who lost their teammates. What would you say their mission is now?
Yeah, that's a tragic part of war. We know that, and that what makes the evacuation, which wasn't pretty, tragic, is you actually had loss of U.S. service members and Afghans in this big blast that takes place there. When I start thinking about our fallen, there's a responsibility on all of us. And I don't know every single person who was killed in Afghanistan or killed in Iraq or even very hard wounded, but I believe our responsibility is we understand where the pain is, and the most acute pain is always going to be with the family. Certainly friends are going to feel it too, but it's the family that every single day they know it's not going to be like it was before. It's never going to be like that. And I think we have a responsibility to remember and check in with the families. And if everybody does that, then all the families get checked in with. I know that's a little Pollyannish. It's probably not happening in every case. But and then there's some lessons that came out of our loss. And I do believe that it's incumbent upon those that move forward to take those lessons and teach them to the next generation. It's got to happen that way.
And this is like something I want to highlight, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to go there. Is they're like, okay, whatever, General, talking about taking these lessons and bringing them forward, like you were way up there. But there was a time a long time ago, in October of '93, where you were a more junior officer, and you were in events that you also were a part of a mission that not only lives were lost, but was also very unpopular after the fact. And I was wondering if we could talk about Task Force Ranger.
Yeah, Task Force Ranger, thanks for bringing that up, Joe. It's obviously very special to me. And we get together in as big a groups as we possibly can every year to at least remember our fallen and just come together. But it was an interesting organization. It was a task force primarily made up of special operations forces, but even some conventional play in there. But it's a fight that takes place in October 1993. And for those that are talking about worth and is it worth it, or try to understand how I think about it, in retrospect, there's not a single vital national interest at stake for what we're doing on the ground. And that's, quite frankly, that's a little troubling. It's troubling to me, perhaps not as a captain, but as I move through increasing leadership positions. We lost 18 killed in an 18-hour firefight. And again, if you can find the vital national interest for the United States in that firefight or around that deployment, I'd like to hear it. But we came out of it, and initially, and after tough firefights or a tough event, there is a natural inclination. Some come together, some pull apart. People will be disappointed in that person or disappointed in this. And Task Force Ranger had a little bit of that in the immediate aftermath. But over time, we started bringing it together. You've got Brad Holling. We're in Brad Holling's place. I think he was key to doing things like that. Norm Hooten, others. I hope myself of bringing people together and really trying to dig into the lessons learned. But when I talk to the widows of our survivors, of some of whom I'm very, very close with, I just promise them that what we did do was we learned the lessons. We learned the lessons, whether some of it was equipment, some of it was very tactical, but we learned the lessons and we shared them with the rest of the military. And I do believe we saved some lives as a result of those lessons that were learned on the streets of Mogadishu. Another interesting piece about it, because I was just down for the Ranger Hall of Fame in Fort Benning, and Larry Perino, Matt Ryerson, a couple others are now coming into the Ranger Hall of Fame. So what you see is a lot of TF Ranger out in support of those. And it's to me, that's powerful. It's powerful where and I always tell people, so whenever one or more are gathered, you have to get a picture. And I gave some of the guys a hard time. Some of the hair is down to their middle of their back, and it's, you're looking at them, you can't quite do it. But I personally have put a bubble around TF Ranger. And it goes back to Bill Garrison was our commander, phenomenal commander, by the way, and he took the fall. He took the fall for TF Ranger, and I always have said, wouldn't it have been nice to have Bill Garrison around in 2001 when we were trying to figure out this thing called the War on Terror? But the just a really good, great leader, and we all respected him, which is interesting. It was trust in our senior leadership. But I remember him gave us the great poem from Shakespeare. If you believe with me today, you'll always be my brother. And I remember one line of it, that every year we'll gather to show off our scars. And it kind of reminds me of when we come together, we do just that. So that's an example of a group, 20 to 30-year-olds, somewhere in between there, young to maybe early mid-30s, coming together and then staying strong over the years. And if anything, growing closer together.
When you guys got back, I mean, I would imagine that, everybody's struggling a little bit. Because like I was saying earlier, like all of a sudden, why are we in Mogadishu? You're talking about national vital interest not being there. And, you guys just lost some of your brothers over there. How did you guys work through it did you work through it as a team, or was it all kind of individuals?
It is a mix, and we could have done the lessons learned process better earlier. And in some ways, I didn't get a chance to talk to him while he was doing the book. In some ways, Mark Bowden writes a book about this. And I think it's 3 to 4 years later. He writes a newspaper series, and I recall talking to him many years later, saying, "Mark, you wrote the lessons learned. You wrote the lessons in the AAR and the what happened in a way that we should have done in the immediate aftermath." So we were very focused by units on different lessons learned, but over time those would come together. And there were people that struggled with it, Joe. The Task Force Ranger has not been immune to suicide. And I'm talking about many years later, where that's an event the person was talking about before they decided to end their lives. So we know there was a challenge there, but that lessons learned, a real lessons learned, and if you can get it away from the political piece of this thing, it loses some of its edge on it. And I like to think, I suspect there are some people that still struggle that were part of that task force, but I like to think that coming together, and as I said, that bubble I put around, you're not allowed to criticize Task Force Ranger unless you were there. And maybe that's too hardcore, but I kind of look at it, that's something important to me. And I look at the men of Task Force Ranger and just have decided they're going to be my brothers, and some of them are going to be very close, very close brothers. But a lot of my lifelong friends, names people know: Norm Hooten, Brad Holling, Tony Copper. They came from that day.
Mantech is more than a defense company. They are a red, white, and blue company, and proud of it. They put the best technology and the best minds in the country behind our nation's security needs. Your challenge is their mission. Your mission drives their solutions. As threats evolve, they adapt at speed, meeting the changing needs of every moment of every mission. Your mission, their commitment, always advancing.
And it's interesting too. Like I don't think I've told you this, but in 1999, I expressed interest for the first time in joining the military. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and my history teacher, Mr. Edenfield, brought a book in. He goes like, "I want you to read this," and it was Black Hawk Down. And I remember reading it, and I was inspired by the entire story. And I just thought it was crazy that like years later our paths would cross, and then we'd be sitting here today
talking about it,
Task Force.
Almost 33 years later.
Yeah.
The Ranger story is personally inspiring to me, and not to take away from any other military organization, but when I talk to different people about cultures of organizations, when you hear Rangers lead the way, I explain to people, I go, that's not a motto, that's a culture statement. And then they remember it, and Rangers do lead the way. And so it's one of those stories where you can see if you're thinking about coming in the military, that can be a story that can grab you. And I think you're aware, I just went to just returned from Normandy over the D-Day celebrations. It's the 82nd anniversary of the D-Day celebrations, and I've been in American Cemetery before, but I'm in American Cemetery, and that's where our war dead are buried. I mean, they were killed either on D-Day or subsequent days afterwards, and I ran across PFC Donahue's gravestone. Now, with the wonders of artificial intelligence, you can look him up. And he's from Connecticut, Waterbury. He's killed 19 years old, probably came in on Dog Beach. I think it's Dog Beach, if I've got this wrong. Don't let your historians tear me apart here. But here's somebody who is now probably trained for 6 to 7 months, made it into this organization, and he's killed on D-Day. And it goes back to what's our responsibility? It's for someone to remember PFC Donahue, killed at age 19, 20 years from now. And that's what we do. We bring their memory to life. We're even-handed about it, but you bring their memory to life and you remember them, and you remember there's family out there that gave everything.
And I think what I'm hearing from you, and this is another story I want to share with you, it's about the power of choice. It's the agency each one of us has as veterans to decide what our service means. And, for the last 2 years, I've been working on this book project with Ryan Holiday, and I've been interviewing Vietnam POWs. Now, these are men who were away from their families, away from life for 8 years. And some of these guys that I'm talking to, George Coker, when he was in his early 20s, led an almost successful escape attempt, from the Hanoi Hilton prison system. And, I was talking to Bob Shoemaker last week, and Bob was the one who was one of the first mid-grade officers shot down. And he did two things. One, he was like, we have to figure out a way to communicate. And he told me this story. He said he was able to reconstitute some ink off a floor and wrote a note that said, "Welcome to the Hanoi Hilton. Scratch your balls if you got this note." And he waited for days, and then all of a sudden, I think it was Everett Alvarez, the first American pilot shot down in Vietnam, scratches his balls as he's walking by, and then also he's got a group of junior officers in a prison, in a cell. This was early on in '65, and he says we have to come up with a way to communicate. We got to figure this out. And one of them remembered some training they got in SEER school. And they were like, okay, this is what we're going to adopt. We all have to learn this prisoner of war attack code. And so I talked to these guys, and I've talked to a few more. And what's amazing is, the Vietnam War, obviously widely unpopular. And they could have spent the rest of their lives angry, pissed off that they gave away 8 years. But everyone I talked to wouldn't wish that experience away. Even though they were tortured, even though they were injured, they chose to focus on the growth from that experience, and the fact that those men bonded together and had their own little war in the prison system against the communist Vietnamese. And so I think, as I do my own reflection, and hearing you talk about Task Force Ranger, and hearing you talk about the decision you made in 22 with Afghanistan, I think it comes down to, it's a choice. You can listen to the talking heads, you can listen to the angry voices on social media that will try to push a narrative on you, but ultimately it's your choice.
Yeah, Joe, I've thought a lot about this. And again, it's, we're at 5 years coming out of Afghanistan. And it's one of the reasons why we're talking today, because I just feel like it is important. The term I've heard is moral injury. So I don't know if I would self-identify as morally injured post the Afghan evacuation. I don't know if that, I know I was very angry. I was making a choice of anger over maybe a little bit different direction. And I also know that I can't just tell someone, hey, you're morally injured, get over it. Let's move past it. And then when you start thinking about moral injury can be your actions, things you did that you're perhaps not proud of down the road. It could be the sense of betrayal, loss of trust, and that's out there. So I know it's out there, and I believe it has to at least be talked about But you're right, there's some choice here. And when I look at veterans, they have choice. And I don't let social media, which is very loud, by the way, influence my choices. At least I don't think so. I choose to not go with the crowd, but go with what I believe is right. And what I believe is right is that the veterans, certainly the veterans I served with, they have every single right to be proud of their service. And they have every single right to be proud of their duty they did. We don't have to like the outcomes. Trust me, I'm not a fan of outcomes. We could go on about forever wars and the rest of that, but a forever war does not have anything to do with the soldier doing his duty. Soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, that's different. And they did their duty. And I would like to see those that still feel this sense of moral injury to come out and go, you know what, I'm pretty damn proud of what I did in Afghanistan. Was it worth it? That's a great question. Joe, I had, I think, probably 10 years in combat zones. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time away from home. It doesn't include training and the rest of it. And there's times where I have this sense of, was that worth it? There's things that I did very wrong I would change, but much of what I did, I don't think I would have wanted to have missed it. And I'm talking about even the bad days and not just the good days, but I thought it was important enough, and I thought it was important enough to the United States of America. I talked about lack of vital interest in Mogadishu. In 2001, because we'd lost guys. We lost guys over time, and we'd lose guys on operations. Sometimes it'd be in groups, sometimes it'd be a singleton. And you always have this sense of, is that worth it? And no single operation was worth the loss of life. But it really was, what were we being asked to do by the United States of America? And our allies joined us. We'd been attacked as the United States of America, and that's what we were being asked to do. Don't let that happen again. Now, we can argue whether that objective still applied 20 years later, but it still was on the books. And, we talked about, okay, I commit to being whatever my nation needs me to be. And that was something that was powerful to me, as which actually made transition hard, because here I am trying to be whatever my nation needs me to be, and then I'm out of the military, and now what am I? That was a pretty radical adjustment. Am I just like some guy who wants to go make money? What am I? And so that's what you have to think about. But now I'll go back and I'll hammer it. If people are injured, then we need to have the things in place to help them get over their injuries. If there's doubts about whether they waste their time, I can't change that in them, only to tell them, from my viewpoint, people I served with, people I saw, people I observed, I appreciated them being out there. I appreciated them being out there at Christmas. I appreciated them being out there on their birthdays, on their families, on their children's birthdays. And I'll forever admire them for that service and their actions.
Well, I want to shift a little bit, if you're willing to, and kind of go back. I want to hear about your time in Afghanistan, because you mentioned it earlier. You did the last 3 years, but your time actually goes back well before that.
Yeah, I have a lot of time in Afghanistan. There's probably some contractors and the rest, I'm sure, have more time, and there may be others that have it. So that's I don't know if that's a badge of honor, but I had an opportunity to see about 3 distinct periods, maybe even 4. I went to Afghanistan for the first time, to Bagram Air Base, by the way, in December of 2001. So this is soon after the towers had fallen. I was working within the Special Operations Command, but I went there very focused on.
What rank were you?
At the time, I was a lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
So I went there and very focused on what we'd call manhunting, or hunting high-valued individuals. The names they're gone now, but it was Zawahiri, it was Mullah Omar, it's Osama bin Laden, and a list of others. But that was my first time in Afghanistan. And I spent a few months from December, February, came back in the spring. And then what was interesting is in the summer of 2002, the focus turns to Iraq. And so now I put Afghanistan behind me. And from 2003 to 2007, I'm essentially knee-deep in Iraq and very focused on Iraq. And I'd come back in 2008 to the Joint Staff, and it was actually kind of a neat period, but it's pre-surge in Afghanistan. Stan McChrystal is the director of the Joint Staff, and I don't know if he knew that he was an heir apparent, but as the director of the Joint Staff and Afghanistan became the main effort, he said, we have to really start thinking about what are the things that Dave McKiernan needs forward. What does the country need to be successful in Afghanistan? This is right after President Obama has been elected, and you can see the shift going from Iraq to Afghanistan. So that's me putting my head back into Afghanistan on the Joint Staff, and I'd subsequently become what was known as the director of the PAC-Afghan Coordination Center, which wasn't fun, by the way, because I think I was a frocked one-star, which means you're not. And the PAC-Afghanistan's Coordination Center was driven by Stan McChrystal, which looked an awful lot like people that have worked in the community would understand. Put all the cross-functional teams together, and then you have one-stop shopping for everything Afghanistan-related. Very heavily backed by our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mike Mullen. But it was you didn't have happy campers amongst the JDIRs, and that's the Joint Staff Directors, which are generally 3 stars. And they felt like they had lost equities in there. So trying to navigate that was pretty challenging. But I had a really solid team there. You'll know some of the names: Gallagher, Szymanski. I could go on with the Tom Sandoval. We put together a good team to the point where Ryan Sandoval came down there. He says it looks like a bunch of Ranger tabs and tridents down here in the Pentagon floor. But that put my head back into Afghanistan. I had a lot to learn. Subsequently, I deployed there in 10 and 11 for another 16-month tour. That was a consequential tour, and we can talk about that if you want to. Probably my most consequential tour of all of my deployments between Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and the rest. And we can talk a little bit about that if we have time to revisit. But I go over for a 16-month tour, come back in the middle of the Afghan surge, go back again, 13, 14, work with General Dunford. Kind of started thinking I was done with it. Was doing some work. I was actually pretty happy in JSOC. It was a busy job, but it was felt fulfilling. And when I got a call in the spring of 2018 to come on up and meet with then Secretary Mattis, little opaque on what the reason was. And it turned out to be to interview to be the next commander of Resolute Support.
I want to pause there. I promise I'll remember this and keep you moving forward. But I want to go back. You said it was a consequential deployment. Why did you say that?
Yeah, so 16 months, which actually was pretty long at the time too.
Yeah.
I came out of that one a little bit convinced I might have overstayed by about 3 months in terms of just kind of a physical and mental type approach. But it was the surge in Afghanistan. But what I was doing was working with the Combined Forces Special Operations Component Command. Think SOF is not, we cooperate, but we're not tied into a single command. And I worked with the Green Berets. I worked with the Navy SEALs, worked with MARSOC. There's a commando mission, so there's an institutional build mission. There's another program going on that's called Village Stability Operations. I mean, it had many names along the way. kicked off first by many people. Ed Reeder was the guy I replaced. But what village stability allowed me as an individual to do was get into the rural areas of Afghanistan across the entire country. If I sat down and figured out how many provinces and how many districts and how many no-name villages I visited, there'd be a lot. And what it was a look at a deeper part of Afghanistan, certainly deeper part than I'd gotten during my tours of Iraq, of what was going on in internal, and meeting people, meeting Afghans at the district level, meeting them at the provincial level, and having the ability to go up to our high command, which was ISAF at the time, sit down and listen to what General Stan McChrystal or General Dave Petraeus were thinking about, watching Dave Rodriguez. But I met some really good guys, they're captains and sergeants, and they were living in the villages, and they were pacifying large areas, and had some great support from General Petraeus and Eric Olson, who was the SOCOM commander at the time, to try to scale this up. But I was watching them mobilize communities and making terrain non-permissive for the Taliban, and really starting to change some things on there. Eventually, that program wouldn't survive the drawdowns. But I met, you've actually met some of them, Hutch, Rob Snyder. These are captains with their team sergeants and their 18 Foxes and the rest of their team making some things happen. And we didn't do it right in every case. And it's always a little bit different in every case. But in terms of an appreciation for the Afghans, I used to tell people it's not Kabul. It isn't Kabul. Kabul is important. It's a political center. But if you're trying to understand what's going on, what's happening out in these districts and villages, really does matter. So consequential from that standpoint. And I leaned on a lot of that information I gleaned there, because I also had the ability to look at the Corps, CORPS, Afghan corps, and try to understand the institutional build there and what the puts and takes were, what the vulnerabilities were. So a lot of that tour actually influenced my tour from 18 to 21.
And then when you got the call, at this point, like, the war's starting to wane in popularity. We've been there forever, and now it's like if you were to look at this line from 2001 all the way to 2018, it's senior leaders passing the potato off to you. What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, first of all, I think I told you I was here at Fort Bragg, and I was kind of enjoying my life. It was busy, but I enjoyed it, and I did not think that was a job that was in my future. I didn't presuppose I had a job, but I didn't think that was a job in my future. I knew Afghanistan, and I think I joked, and I said, I know I'm going to be I joked. It was kind of I said, first of all, I know at the end of it, after 2-3 years, I said, I'll be very tired. I'll have stomach problems. No offense to my Afghan friends, but we'd get dysentery a lot from the different bacteria in their food. And I said, and I'll have a diminished reputation. And that was tongue in cheek. And then I added, and I don't even remember when I picked this up. I joke around with my staff. I'd listen to the Steely Dan song, I'm a Fool to Do Your Dirty Work. That's my theme song. And I don't know if you've listened to that lately, but it became a little bit more relevant as time went on, but that was tongue in cheek. And ultimately, when I got the job, you do what you always do. You said, okay, you're offered this job. Pretty difficult to turn down a combat assignment. I don't know many people that would do that. And General Dunford and I had a conversation. He gave me an out if I wanted it, but it just didn't feel like that was part of my DNA. So as I went in there, try to get smart again and understand what was actually happening on the ground, where we were with the South Asia strategy, what our intentions were, and then started studying and headed over. And
you said studying. Like, were you talking to past commanders? Were you talking to experts? Were you reading? Like, what did that look like?
Well, a couple things. As reading, of course, you're talking to your through official channels, DIA, our intel community writ large, to a degree the State Department. Just trying to make sure you are up on the latest issues. Where are we in the strategy? What's going forward? Trying to meet who you think are going to be key people in the United States as you go forward. Rereading, recontacting Afghans. I mean, once they heard I was coming over there, they were calling me up, and because I never changed my number, and they were calling me up and wanting to talk about how we were going to do things together. So it's a mix, but it's a lot of work as you prep to go into it. But so a little bit of all of the above, but a lot of going back and opening up some books again, Joe.
Yeah, and remember, like, one of the books, I'm just curious how it shaped you, because it really, my experience in Afghanistan was just a few trips over there over the years. It wasn't like to the level that you had, or even a lot of my peers had. But it was a book called The Game Without Rules. That just really, and for me, it really colored my thinking on what I was getting into when you invited me to hang out with you for a while over there. But what about you?
The Game Without Rules was about Buzkashi, right? If you look at it, it's not polo. It's not played on in Palm Beach or some other kind of high society place in the United States. It's the whacking around the head, and you just weren't sure what the rules were. What I tried to explain to people about Afghanistan, and it was why. Go ahead.
Yeah, stop you real quick. I think it's really important because this is a random game that I didn't learn about till I read the book. You hit it just a little bit, but I just want to go a little bit deeper. But it's two teams riding around in horses. Sometimes the goal line changes, but basically you can punch, you can kick, you can whack somebody, and you're trying to get a dead animal carcass across a line.
Yeah.
And so that game Buzkashi, it became, I feel like, a symbol for like some of the stuff we were doing there, not going
well,
by.
It absolutely was. Okay, that's why I had you read the book in the first place, and it was just trying to understand, hey, what am I getting myself into? And it's some people thrive in rules environments, and some people are able to be operate a little bit better in environments that are somewhat ambiguous. When I mentioned that I'd gone to Afghanistan in 2001 to 2002, and I didn't understand it at all. It's such a mosaic. It's been written about, but it's such a mosaic. And even if you took our village stability experience, we had it in different parts of the country, kind of across the map. It was, if you saw one village stability site, you only saw one. You had to go look at them all because they're going to be a little bit different. And fractious is a way Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan have been described, but it's a mosaic. So I always felt like I was just in this deficit of really understanding what would motivate somebody to do something, and understanding. It's at the top of my lessons learned. If we have time for that, we're at 5 years, but our lack of understanding or developing institutions to understand come out as my number one lesson learned. We got to go back and fix. Now, the problem with it is it's through our history. You can go back to Vietnam. You've got John Paul Vann out there talking about Vietnam after we'd been there for 12 years. He goes, we don't have 12 years of experience. We have 12 one-year experiences. And Afghanistan was almost even a little worse. But we had the ability to develop the mechanisms, but we never did. Again, you think about a Hutch, a Snyder, a Don Boldock, they're out. Their names are out there. The sergeants are out there. They've been through this. They've seen this, and it doesn't mean they've got it on their first tour, but their second tour or third tour, and the compounding nature of learning was something that I think crippled us throughout.
You kind of touched on you touched on lessons learned a little bit ago. I'm curious. Have you been participating in a lot of these Afghan reviews over the last couple of years?
Yeah. By the way, Afghan reviews and investigations aren't my favorite activity for a variety of reasons, but they are important to grab lessons learned. And again, when we start talking about what do we owe the next generation, what's our responsibility, there lessons have to come out of it. unfortunately, this one became political. It always was political, but it became very political early on. And so that's, in my view, it's made it problematic to really grab lessons. I talked about the lack of understanding, the lack of institutional builds to create that understanding. But when I start counting, I participated in a closed hearing with the Senate Armed Services Committee in 2021, very close to the actual collapse of government and the security forces in Afghanistan, and the events at Abbey Gate. So we talked about that, although I wasn't present for that. They're looking for what led up to that, so I had a role in that. Later in 22, I participated in a joint staff study. I never saw the results of that. Again, probably not my best. Again, I was still very emotional about it. I told you I was a little bit in my angry state, and but I've never seen the results of that. Then it quieted down for a bit, and then in 2024, I got called by the HVAC which was an odd one for me. I'd never testified, but I did what was called a transcribed interview. It was 9 hours, and it was actually pretty difficult on me. One, because I was examined, cross-examined, re-examined over a period of 9 hours, and it wasn't a pleasant experience for me because everyone's looking to find blame as opposed to the lessons, and that to me is frustrating. But I did it, and then. Most recently, I did or I guess back in February, I did the review by the Pentagon. That's a new one. We're opening that up again and doing that review. And then recently, I talked to the Afghan War Commission, which is supposed to be a bipartisan look at lessons learned. And quite frankly, we'll see.
How did the Pentagon one go?
That it's still going. I mean, as of what we're talking about, it's still going. I asked them some pretty straightforward questions when I went in there, because the scuttle is it's just about scuffing up some reputations, maybe taking action against senior military for accountability purposes. And I asked them, is that what we're doing here, or are we actually looking for lessons learned? And of course they said, well, we're looking for lessons learned, but accountability matters, and I don't disagree with that statement. It's really the question of how we exercise it. I went in there and I spent probably about 4 or 5 hours with them, and where we are in the review, it's a pretty good group of people that are part of that, and I want to hold kind of my comments on because I want to see what they produce. They are actually the first group that, to my knowledge, that has actually requested and reviewed the message traffic from 2020, so late 20 to 21. And so at that point now you're into not what you remember, but what you were thinking at the time, which led you down to the series of events, which included the withdrawal and the subsequent evacuation. But they've done that. Now, I don't know what their conclusions are. Like I said, good, polite, respectful. But Joe, it was very obvious to me. I mean, as I looked at it, and we were talking about different parts of Afghanistan. Not a lot of experience there. One of the things, because we talked about Bagram, and I thought to myself, I said, nobody here in this room, except for me, and has really ever even walked around Bagram and understands that what Bagram was to the United States military, or what it wasn't, what were its security shortfalls. So that's but we'll see. Doesn't mean you have to have somebody with more experience than you to take a look at what you're saying. Little concerned. My scribe, or my purported scribe, is a social media influencer. That's a head scratcher to me in terms of seriousness. But like I said, we'll see what they come out with. And at least one person on the panel that's been very vocal about what he thinks happened there. So I'm not sure if we're reviewing or we're confirming our previous commitments. But they'll publish some results here, and we'll see what they come up with. The Afghan War Commission is. Again, more supposed to be more bipartisan. I'm not certain they're not struggling. They're trying to cover the whole 20 years of war, whereas the Afghan Review and even the HFAC really just wanted to cover the withdrawal. They don't want it. They didn't go back too far, and you have to go back to understand how did I get what were the things we did here that got me here.
Yeah, you said the HVAC was 9 hours of
It
transcribe.
was tough. It was very difficult. It was, and I didn't walk out feeling good about it. And my testimony, although it was unclassified, was leaked to a reporter almost immediately. So as I walked out, as soon as the transcript was complete, and for most people, we don't like sitting there hearing our voices over and over again, and reading a transcript that goes through 9 hours. That was difficult.
Was the Pentagon one that you did? Was that also transcribed?
No, the Pentagon one, it wasn't recorded, which actually might be problematic. And I got a set of notes back, which I had to write a lot of notes back to go, no, this is what I was talking about. So it wasn't, to my knowledge, it was not recorded. Rather just kind of note takers throughout. But having talked to some of the other participants, a similar experience where they got their notes back and they had to go, no, this is actually what I was saying. So my concern there is just that there's a lot of open for a lot of interpretation.
Hey, I was just curious because now that I'm doing these oral interviews for the book, I'm finding that the notes I'm taking in the moment often don't look like what was actually said in the thing. So I'm like really big on recording now and then transcribing. But you mentioned the Afghan withdrawal. Have you talked about that at all since it's happened?
I have not publicly, not in a broad way. Obviously, in the different reviews, I've talked about it, and I'm not necessarily a public speaker, but I've done some speaking engagements with some smaller groups, and of course, they want to talk about Afghanistan. I mean, it's on my resume, and so Afghanistan is something that's important to the United States of America. Was quite an inflection point, and we know why. One, it's looked bad, and we also lost service members at Abbey Gate on 26 August 2021 with a ISIS suicide bomber attack. But I haven't spent a lot of time talking about it, and to be honest, it's because there's always this blame. It's a blame factor, but I will talk about it just a little bit here, and. I think, as you know, 15 April, we got a decision from President Biden that the U.S. military would withdraw from Afghanistan. And I want to say the first end date was 11 September, but that was a window. Okay, that wasn't driven by anything other than not crowding us to not be able to meet our timelines, because we actually had done some preliminary work and figured that we could probably do in about 75 to 90 days pre-decision, just looking at it, and that we need at least that amount of time to get out, because there's always going to be problems with the withdrawal. But we started in April to conduct the withdrawal. At the time, not certain what the embassy presence was going to be. So a little bit of back and forth on embassy stays or doesn't stay. My personal opinion was that the embassy was not tenable without a military presence around it, meaning resolute support, which brings all your NATO, and the same with the rest of the international diplomatic community. But we as military, we provide best military advice. We don't dictate policy. Ideally, or at times, certainly our best military advice informs policy, but we don't dictate what will or won't happen. And just because I got asked this, I actually don't make value judgments on presidential decisions, meaning I may not like it, I may agree with it, but that's not something that I share with people. What I do know, it's a presidential order, and now you're in the position that you execute it as well as you possibly can. So you've heard the criticism, rush to the exits. Quite frankly, I tell people, I go, we started evacuating as soon as we got the order, or started withdrawing as soon as we got the order. We were told it needed to be in good order and safe, and that was actually important. 11 locations around the country, Some tough provinces too. Kandahar, you have Helmand provinces you've got to evacuate, and even Parwan, which is where Bagram sits. It was our most attacked base throughout my time in Afghanistan, from both indirect fire, suicide attacks, just a lot of things. So we built a plan with the idea being that Bagram would be our last base. And the military would leave in good order, but I didn't want the force to linger, meaning half in, half out. And I identified the risks, and my sense was that the risks were rising as time was going on. I coined the term, we got to be careful of the very bad, very fast scenario, and that's the, people would say, what does that mean? I'd say it's the collapse of the Afghan security forces or the government rapidly, that I really did not believe we wanted to be there for that. Now, I've looked at the reasons why we wanted to keep a diplomatic presence, and they actually, on the surface, make sense. They make sense because we had a backlog of special immigrant visas. We had a lot of things that had been promised. I mean, I want to say there was at least 20,000 backlogged. 20,000 times 4, that's 80,000 people, and nothing was really moving. There weren't real pathways for us to evacuate Afghans. Then there's, and by the way, the Afghan military, which became controversial afterwards, there was no pathway for them. There was no official pathway. They weren't part of the SIVs, and so when they ultimately come to the United States of America, they come on an asylum program and subsequently develop pathways once they got here. So we took 90 days, and Bagram was very deliberate. Perimeter shrunk around the country, and I tell people, I said, just because we didn't get anybody hurt during a withdrawal, I was actually very concerned about the protection of the force. And shrinking perimeters with fires leaving country, that's problematic. And I was quite proud of the way the force redeployed. We did not leave equipment behind. I know that's out there, but we were very deliberate. We did not leave guns behind. We either brought equipment back to the United States, destroyed it if it was more cost effective to destroy it, accounted for our sensitive items, our people, and we didn't just have 3,500 people. We had 25,000 contractors around it, plus all of NATO. And so we closed Bagram, and then I departed about 90 days post the decision. My view is I would have liked more to come out. I would not have liked to have left as many Americans. But we kept, the time we had Bagram open, we never moved anything except the military account through Bagram. Nobody left through there. And just kind of as a side note, I've told people, I said, HKIA looks bad on 15 August, post Ghani's resignation, up until 14 August, it was a functioning commercial airport. It was a permissive airport, but we got fixed. We had too many people there, and we waited until we got an emergency, and I think it's a lesson learned, Joe. Best way to deal with an emergency is don't let the situation become an emergency. Ghani's resignation incited the panic, and we saw the resignation and departure, and we saw the Afghan security forces coherence collapse the next day.
There's a point I want to make, and then I have a question to ask off that. One is that you had spent the 3 years you were in command actually reducing the U.S. footprint in Afghanistan, and there were tons of people on staff putting, I can't even count the man hours down to the vehicle, making sure that equipment and everything was done very methodically up until that point, correct?
Yeah, the equipment question, and I'd have to go back. CGAR probably has a better accounting, and I actually do appreciate CGAR's reporting. So, John Sopko, if you're listening, I didn't see you as the big adversary that everyone claimed you were. A lot of the equipment that's left post an emergency evac is Afghan equipment that has been transferred to them. Some of it comes from the United States, some comes from other NATO countries, but that I believe, is the bulk of the equipment. But I do know that what we took out from mid-April to mid-July, and previous to that too, because we've been stair-stepping down, very well accounted for. Actually a major logistics feat, and under some threat conditions. I try to remind people, perimeters are shrinking. You have a Taliban threat. You have an ISIS threat, a very active ISIS attack threat. And then you started having third nation countries that got a little interested in what we were doing, and wouldn't it be nice to kind of ding us as on the way out. But over 1,000 C-17 loads. You couldn't do it today. With the way the drone threat is done, I've told people this, I said, you already have to see that we've evolved over even the way we did it in 21. You'd be challenged to do it today just because of the exposure of capital assets on airfields, both coming in or just sitting on the airfield. So it's like I said, the lesson is don't wait for the emergency. And I'll say something, this will be a little controversial, but I want this to, I think the people of Afghanistan, certainly those that know me well, will understand this. When we started the withdrawal, I understood what that meant. And I watched it in May, and I watched the what I call the surrender of districts without a fight, that the people of Afghanistan had made a decision that the Taliban were going to be the new government. That also happened to us in 2001. And it happened reverse, where the people decided the Taliban are done, and the Taliban just basically wilted away. They either went to another country or they wilted back in the countryside. So this collapse was happening. And it culminated with Ghani's departure. But the risk was rising. And so even with good intentions of keeping a diplomatic presence, in my view, they didn't match the risk. And that's how I talk about it to people. I said, we let risk outrun activities on the ground. And ultimately, we got fixed in a place where we were trying to then get out first 4,000 people out of a U.S. embassy, but what grew to 120,000.
Were you voicing that risk?
I was. I believe. One of the things about the Afghan review that was actually, well, I said, I think you recall I dropped a notebook off in November 2021 of classified. It was all the message traffic. I dropped it off at Fort Bragg, and I didn't think I'd ever have to get into it. But when we were doing the Afghan review, they said, hey, we want to talk about certain message traffic, and they're looking for what are Miller, McKenzie, and Milley saying to one another, and probably some other players in the circles there. And so I actually went back and looked at it. I went back at the classified facility and took a quick look at it. And because you're not sure what you really said 4 or 5 years ago, I'm pretty confident the risk picture was there. And then people have to make decisions with that risk picture. But the blunt lesson learned is maybe not completely evacuate the embassy, but certainly reduce our footprint. If we're really going to push on SIVs, at least let's expedite it while we still have some capability in country. We have a lot of airlift out of country. And same for people at risk. I identified Afghans that I knew were at risk, and I was worried about them. But there weren't 10,000 of them. There were maybe 50 to 100. And what I was talking about earlier, and I do believe my Afghan friends will understand, once we started that withdrawal, my moral obligation, because I've heard that a lot, my moral obligation, without discounting the service of Afghans to our cause, my moral obligation was the soldiers, the diplomats, of our civilians. That was protecting them was my moral obligation. And this is not an easy one to talk about, Joe. It's we'll see. Perhaps at the 5-year mark, I won't be able to pack it back away. But it's one that what we being right, but being ineffective doesn't make you feel any better. You still have what happened between 15 and 31 August.
Still carrying that.
Yep.
I I can ask if I can. Bagram. That's another one that people could talk about a lot. Like if only we would have held on to Bagram. What was that like in the summer of 21?
Yeah, well, obviously Bagram was, as I said, it was assumed from our standpoint as we're doing military planning, everyone goes through Bagram. That's where the main closure is. We kept Bagram open even a little longer than I was comfortable with because we're just waiting for the NATO forces to tell us they were closed and had gone wheels up and were out of Afghan airspace. My battlefield judgment was it's the right call. I'm not sure I would change it. Now, if someone had said, hey, keep it open, we're going to actually move people, we're going to use it for throughput, absolutely. But I'm not sure anybody was ever coming through Bagram.
And what, based off the numbers that were on the ground, what would the risk have been?
Bagram's hard to secure. It has the advantage of two runways, so we'll add that. It's also got an expansive perimeter. It's a place that when I look back at the attacks in Bagram, I remember at least 3 suicide attacks, multiple IDF by ISIS, by the way, who were would launch MLRS attack, a modified MLRS attack. Over the years, attacks at the gates. I don't believe that the idea that there would be no crowds at Bagram, there would have been crowds at Bagram too. It's the house was on fire, and whether we liked it or not, we were offering a fire escape for people, to include the Afghan people, the Afghan military. We offered an escape, and so from a purely battlefield judgment piece. Bagram was tough to secure. We didn't have the numbers to secure it. We would have had to keep an awful lot more than the 600 that were ultimately authorized for the embassy security force, and a lot of that would be contractors. So it's not in your numbers, but you have to have you have to be able to cover that perimeter, and with fires, and you have to cover that perimeter with observation. And we did a pretty good job of it over the years, but like I said, I'm not sure how many people actually walk that perimeter and understand the challenge in the gaps and the GDA and the rest of it.
Another question I have for you, and I don't know if you'll answer this or not, but when you look back at World War II, you've got Marshall, Eisenhower, and those folks there at the beginning. They're there at the end. You look at Vietnam War, you've got Westmoreland there at the beginning, they're close to the end, but they're all senior leaders. And as you said early on in the interview, you were a lieutenant colonel when Afghanistan started. So do you feel, because the war spanned multiple administrations, multiple senior leaders, that senior leaders should be held accountable at all?
Senior leaders should always be held accountable, and that means examining some truths that you're not sure you did right. So there is an accountability piece, and it's ideally it comes out in the lessons learned process, but perhaps it doesn't. So others will bring it out. Sometimes the others are authors or somebody else who are just going to go ahead and judge somebody's performance. The thing about Afghanistan, which is interesting to me, you always wonder what were the roads not taken. And I was actually talking to Stan McChrystal probably about 4 or 5 days ago, and I just have this sense, because I knew him when he'd been the JSOC commander, the amount of time he spent overseas. Stan would only serve in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2010, and then he'd be relieved by President Obama. But I've got to believe that if that relief hadn't happened, he would have been a 2, 3, maybe even a 4-year commander in Afghanistan, meaning I'm here. This is my job. It's not the next job. And to a degree, that would have driven some level of continuity. Because to get the institutional change, you have to have the continuity in play. And I was able to do that to a certain degree just because of the time I spent there. Or if I wanted something, I didn't look for a service solution. I could say, no, this is what I want because I know this is what I need. And sometimes that rubs the services the wrong way. I don't think I've pissed off too many of them. But the lack of continuity, I believe, hurt us, Joe. But going back to your original question, senior leader accountability is got to be the bedrock of the trust of trusted institutions. And it bothers me that you hear a lot of that there is no senior leader accountability. So yeah, I think senior leaders, we to include me, bear some responsibility for the how we took policy and how we arrayed the force and then operationally employed the force. I think that's going to be part of the lessons learned.
I guess one of the final questions as we close this portion down is, it's really hard because you hear a lot of people, especially again online, a lot of times this is a dumpster fire, but a lot of people say that like we've as Americans or the generals or whatever have forgot how to win wars.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, I know what they're talking about. I read it too, and it talks about the last time we really won a war was World War II, and some people will say Desert Storm. This is not an excuse for any of that, but really the question is, what are the objectives? What are the objectives assigned to military commanders? And I'll just use as a case in point so people can really understand. So I don't want them to believe that I didn't have any objectives assigned to me by the President of the United States, by the way, which cross administrations. If you look at Eisenhower getting ready to invade the continent in June of 1944, his directive is pretty simple: destroy the German army or annihilate the German army. You go back to 1943, and you're more of a historian than I am, so I'm trying to remember whether it was Yalta or Casablanca, where FDR demands unconditional surrender. That means you're going to fight differently. Okay, now that's your policy. You are going to fight differently. The principal objective I had written was don't let Afghanistan become a safe haven for terrorism. There's a couple others, some things to do with Pakistan and the rest, but don't do that. Now figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen. So not an excuse, but understand as you look at wars, you probably have to look at war objectives. For those that are out there listening to this, you can look at war objectives for our current conflicts or just previous conflicts, and you can make a determination. So I think it's a harsh criticism that we don't know how to win a war, and maybe without the rest of the story involved. The real question, and let's go back to veterans again. And I'd say to the veterans, okay, if you want to have a problem up here with the senior leaders, you guys know you won the battles. You know you won the tactical fights, going back to doing your duty. And, do those tactical fights contribute to the stated objectives, or do they not? And in some cases, they didn't. Some cases, we were fighting our own private war. But in many cases, you could pin what somebody was doing at great risk and go, that connects right to this objective. That's a pathway to our objectives, our assigned objectives from the President of the United States.
So if folks are listening right now that are sitting on these like various review committees that are out there, like what would you ask them to do from the veteran standpoint?
Yeah, I think they're a message to veterans. And by the way, I consider myself a veteran.
Yeah.
I think their message needs to be authentic and real, and there needs to be a level of understanding. Because I'll just go back and revisit a topic. So I was thinking about it when I made the recommendation to stay in Afghanistan. I mean, and I just say that now I didn't make that to the president, but I'm going to assume, based on everything I know, that my recommendation made it to the President of the United States via my chain of command, through the Central Command, Frank McKenzie, via the chairman, and also to the Secretary of Defense. So I made the recommendation to stay, and I've actually heard myself, "Oh, you're a forever war general," and I just say, "No, but I forever look at the objectives that I've been assigned, and the objectives that I've been assigned say do this." And if you're saying this is the objective, and by the way, they can change it, but if this is the objective, then I'm telling you, my best military advice is about how can I best achieve that objective? And it may not be popular, it may not be according to what people want. But when you start talking, let's understand the objectives assigned to the veterans, to the men and women that we ask to serve in these conflicts. Let's make sure we understand those. And then, two, I think that I talked a little bit about moral injury earlier, and I wish I could just say, don't be injured, heal. But I know I can't. And I go back and I even look at something like the Afghan withdrawal, just call it April, July. I know for a fact that I had repeat offenders that were very close to Afghan forces that were with them, had to say goodbye to them. And I knew as I went into this thing, remember my theme song I mentioned earlier, "I'm a fool to do your dirty work." I knew I was doing the dirty work. And the dirty work was having to be the guy to look him in the eye and say, "I can't help you here anymore, and I'm leaving." And it was hard and it was distasteful. And I think we need to understand that it was hard and it was distasteful in many cases for many of our veterans. But the message has got to be there, and it's got to be authentic, and it's more than a thank you for your service. It's the pieces and parts of what you did mattered. And where we let them get into places where it didn't matter, shame on us. Shame on us.
Well, as we, I guess, bring our time down here today, we began this interview talking about transitions. And then I kind of want to finish it there. Now you've been out 5 years. I'm coming on 2. And so what do you think a successful transition looks like?
Yeah. First of all, after doing this and spending a couple hours with you, like I said, we unpacked a lot. So this will set me back here in my transition, just so you do know, okay? I'm going to...
we'll take care of it tonight.
Usually what I found is when I get like this, it's not the time to throw some bourbon on it. It's or beer, or any alcohol. Joe, it goes back to, why am I hanging out with you right now? Why do I agree to do this podcast? Because I enjoy hanging out with you. And I'm comfortable being in this room with you because you're the kind of people that I want to be in a room with. And, some people are going to find different people out there. So if I just broke it down, I said, look around the room. Are you happy with the people you're in the room with? Which could be your family, could be your friends, could be business associates. Are you learning something, and are you growing? And, just this little exercise here, I'm gonna go back and have 100 thoughts about Afghanistan because I told those guys I wouldn't stop thinking about them. But that's learning and growing. Everyone says be happy. If I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm around people that I really enjoy, I'm starting to get into the zone of being happy.
That's great. Well, sir, thanks for your time. It's been great to have an excuse to, like you said, hang out again. And thanks for opening up about this, because as we've talked over the last couple of years, there's a lot of loud voices out there right now with opinions on Afghanistan, and I think it's worth bringing it back to a more measured tone and to be a little bit more analytical, as much as it hurts for everybody out there.
Yeah.
But let's make sure we're doing the right thing for the next generation.
I tell you what, it's okay for people that maybe don't have the same experience to question the Afghanistan experience, and I do believe it's actually kind of healthy for our profession. But at the end of the day, remember, you actually had people that lived this, and there's probably some more there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. No, thank you, Joe.
Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach find me. Hope you find me.